Hello, I am Robert Pinsky. I'm going to briefly, go ahead. I'm going to try to very briefly say yet again, as many people have heard this before, what the Robert Lowell Memorial Lecture Series is. The donors, family to do with the Shenson Foundation, liked the idea that in room 222, where we still meet creative writing classes taught by Ha-Jin and Leslie Epstein and Maggie Dietz and Louise Glick and me, Robert Lowell taught a remarkable writing class in which the students included Anne Sexton, George Starbuck, and Sylvia Plath. And this series is subtitled In the Spirit of Room 222. That spirit I take to be the spirit of art. In art, there are not students and teachers and famous people and unfamous people. There's just art. On some level, we're all seeking the same thing. So the tradition of the series is there's a brief reading by a recent student, followed by a reading by a faculty member, followed by our guest. Tonight, the recent student will be Rachel DeWoskin. I will be the faculty member. I think I was the first one. This is my return performance. And the guest is Charles Simic. Rachel will introduce me, then I'll introduce Charlie. I'll say a few words about Rachel DeWoskin. Her first book, Foreign Babes in Beijing, published by Norton, is an extremely smart, readable, delightful account of, it's a nonfiction, of being a famous but ill-paid soap opera star in Beijing in a soap opera called, indeed, Foreign Babes in Beijing. The second book, which is going to appear in May, is a wonderful novel called Repeat After Me, to be published by Overlook Publishers. But Rachel is a serious person, so that fiction and nonfiction for her come after poetry. She is working on a book of poems that I know will be a stunner, as the two prose books, the warm-ups, have been. And it's a pleasure to present Rachel DeWoskin.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm going to read 3 poems, one early poem about China, and 2 recent poems from a collection I'm working on called The Caretaker's Daughter. The China poem is called The Blind Massage Parlor on Maizha Diar Street. Doctors Han and Wang run the Love Heart Massage in one of Beijing's 2.5 billion broken alleys. You'll recognize it by the red awning, Dr. Han says on the phone, and when I do, I wonder who told him. Later, on one immaculate bed in a row of 7, I feel Dr. Han's fist wedge between 2 innocent bones in my shoulder. He accompanies the soundtrack of my gasping with a simple statement: we hated Titanic. I shift my weight on the straight white table and arch my eyebrows, a gesture Dr. Han overhears. He rests his right hand for one thoughtful moment on my spine and explains, the story was stupid with its music. Your American Hollywood knows what about love? Nothing in that movie fit. I make shy eye contact with the client in a bed across the row. We are the only 2 here today. I think she loves Titanic, from the delicate way she lifts her neck to look at me, confused. I smile and replace my face into the massage table's dark head hole. Maybe Dr. Wang and Dr. Han also smile at each other over us. Because Dr. Han says, we've been married for 18 years. We feel what other people just see. Only after Dr. Wang, his wife of 18 years, giggles like a movie star in love, does he turn his attention and hands back to me. These days we have a lot of foreign clients, he remarks. How do you say in English, does this hurt? Okay. This is a poem about my grandfather. It's called Irv's Wives. Irv's Wives. The 2 make good TV. First dark, the second ice cube, clear and blonde. My Grandma Mary, lovely diva, was herself more than one wife to Irv. Her mind split up and fluttered like a shuffled deck. She lit the house on fire when he was late. Her dinners were as beautiful as blue St. Louis days, and so was she, all that. Bright wedding china shattered in a fit, worthy of a Disney witch. Irv hid. Cool basement with my father, building televisions, calculators, connecting endless wires, starting Heathkit projects I found later when he died. Electronics were his, weaving, waiting for a time when she was back, okay, re-sane. It came that time sometimes, and then it went. He married Eleanor, her opposite, moved out, moved on. So Mary flew to Florida, bought herself a giant diamond ring, then died and left the rock to me. I have it on. 3 carat, if you can believe it. Just about the size of a stage 3 tumor, but square and flat and round at once. In fact, it's nothing like flesh. Oh, family brass knuckle that can't be destroyed, you reflect crazy light, threaten to slice any glass in our path. And this last poem is called Housekeeping. It's about enormous spiders in Brazil and the frog who lives among them. Housekeeping. A frog lives under dirt with spiders, chicken-sized and violent, chicken-eating even, but they love this live Brazilian thing. Fetch his water, keep him in a safe, dark corner. With their fangs, protect him well until, well, what is it happens to a frog? Kenny Rogers sang it country. There is someone for everyone, turns out. Even in the country underground, spiders hunt fast, meaty prey in packs, return at night to eat. Their babies taste like chicken, but never the frog. Maybe love's a prison, green frog sweeper, insect cleaner, ants, ticks, mites, enormous spiders dislike the tickly bugs he eats. Not movie-worthy love, but something workable, domestic. Virgin marriage, homespun web, no swimming, buzzing, no flies land from blue onto your outstretched tongue, no lily pads for you, no leaping. Beloved frog you are, the very definition of a pet. Eat your grief quick, keep kept. Okay. Thank you. And now, although he needs no introduction, in his poem Last Robot Song, Robert Pinsky writes of a little newborn god that made the first instrument, sweet vibration of mind, mind, mind. That instrument is like Robert's imagination, generating, moving, making meaning and music. Over the last 35 years, he has written a kind of map, not only of the landscape of his own mind, but also of all of our stories, national, personal, metrical, a map of where and how we remember and create. Robert Pinsky collects infinite, disparate pieces and lightly, precisely, almost magically, fuses them into what one critic calls a divine record. It's human, too, that record. Textured, complicated, technical, mischievous, combining what's largest with what's most intricate, most playful with most profound. His poems often move from one to the other and back in the sweep of a single line or stanza, as in The Forgetting, when he wonders, what if the Baseball Hall of Fame overflowed with too many thousands of greats, all in time unremembered? Hardly anybody can name all 8 of their great-grandparents. Can you? Will your children's grandchildren remember your name? Robert Pinsky is an American treasure, the embodiment of what's most generous, expansive, and free. He lets his language belong to everyone, the loader, the docker, the navvy, the planter, the picker, the sorter. He gives everyone a voice by sharing his, by writing, as he does in Samurai Song, I have no priest, my tongue is my choir. His poetry empowers. It was Robert Pinsky who asked Americans what our favorite poems are, to the tune of tens of thousands of responses, a decade of letters filled with longing and attachment, filled with thank you for asking. This, the Favorite Poem Project, is vintage Pinsky, his giving, brilliant response to the tired cliche that poetry is somehow tired. When Newsweek asked Robert once whether poetry was dead, Robert asked politely, isn't Newsweek dead? Wherever he goes, poetry is alive, relevant, beloved, and he goes everywhere. Translating Dante, writing librettos, starring on The Simpsons, competing with Stephen Colbert in metaphor-offs. The world is engaged in his writing precisely because his writing is the fiber of our politics, cultures, hopes, and heartbreaks. His poems let us navigate, they let us see. They are a lifetime's worth of odes to meaning, asking, as he asks, what is imagination but your lost child born to give birth to you? Demanding, as he demands, you are the wound, you be the medicine. We owe Robert thanks for our collective memory, for some of what's most beautiful in our language, indeed, for who we are. It's a thrilling honor to introduce Robert Pinsky.
I have to say it's better than literary prizes, it's better than poet laureate titles, it's better than good reviews to have a talented, brilliant, accomplished young peer and colleague say things about you that, even if I don't deserve them, they still sound great. And I appreciate them very much. It is the best kind of laurel, the most real kind of laurel. I'll read a few poems from my recent book, Gulf Music, and I'll read the poem that Rachel first quoted. A certain number of the poems in this book are interested in the idea of forgetting, which forgetting is a very interesting category of memory, in my opinion. This is a poem called The Forgetting. The forgetting I notice most as I get older is really a form of memory, the undergrowth of things unknown to you young that I have forgotten. Memory of so much crap, jumbled with so much that seems to matter. Lieutenant Callie, Captain Easy, Mei-Ling Sung, Sibi Sisti, and all the forgettings that preceded my own, Baghdad, Egypt, Greece, the plains, centuries of lootings of antiquities, obscure atrocities. Imagine a big tent filled with mostly kids yelling for poetry. In fact, it happened. I was there in New Jersey at the famous poetry show. I used to wonder, what if the baseball hall of flame overflowed with too many thousands of greats, all in time unremembered? Hardly anybody can name all 8 of their great-grandparents. Can you? Will your children's grandchildren remember your name? You'll see, you little young jerks. Your favorite music and your political furors, too, will need to get sorted in dusty electronic corridors. In 1972, Joanne Lai was asked the lasting effects of the French Revolution. Quote, too soon to tell. Remember? Or was it Mao Zedong? Poetry made out of air strains to reach back to begats and suspiring forward into air, grunting to beget the hungry or overfed future. Ezra Pound praises the emperor who appointed a committee of scholars to pick the best 450 no plays and destroy all the rest. The fascist. The stand-up master Stephen Wright says he thinks he suffers from both amnesia and déjà vu. Quote, I feel like I have forgotten this before. Who remembers the arguments when jurors gave Pound the only prize for poetry awarded by the United States government? Until then. I was in the big tent when the guy read his poem about how the Jews were warned to get out of the Twin Towers before they hit. The crowd was applauding and screaming. They were happy. It isn't that they were anti-Semitic or anything. They just weren't listening. Or no, they were listening, but that certain way. In it comes, you hear it, and that self-same second you swallow it or expel it. An ecstasy of forgetting. There's a series of poems in this book that go back to all the memories and human history embedded in objects. It's called First Things to Hand. Door, photograph, jar of pens, newspaper. There's one called Other Hand. Other Hand. The lesser twin. The one whose accomplishments and privileges are unshowy, getting to touch the tattoo on my right shoulder, wearing the mitt. I feel its familiar weight and textures as the adroit one rests against it for a moment. They twine fingers. Lefty continues to experience considerable difficulty expressing himself clearly and correctly in writing. Comparison with his brother prevents him from putting forth his best effort. Yet this halt one, too, has felt a breast, thigh, clasped an ankle, or, most intimate of all, the fingers of a hand. And possibly his trembling touch, as less merely adept and confident, is subtly the more welcome of the two. In the Elysian fields, where every defect will be compensated and the last will be first, this one will lead skillfully, while the other will assist. And as my shadow stalks that underworld, the right hand, too, will rejoice, released from its long burden of expectation, the yoke of dexterity finally laid to rest. I'll read one more poem before introducing Charles Simic. I'll make it a poem, Antique. Charlie and I, the last couple of years, have read poems with jazz musicians in New York. And this is one, there are occasions I've enjoyed obscenely much, just really eat it up. And this is a poem I associate with those occasions. It's also about this process of remembering your own life, but also things that go back before you. And it's couched as a kind of a love poem. From me to someone I love, but in a way it's Adam and Eve or my mom and dad. It's a sort of all-purpose love poem. Antique. Antique. I drowned in the fire of having you. I burned in the river of not having you. We lived together for hours in a house of 1,000 rooms, and we were parted for 1,000 years. 10 minutes ago, we raised our children who cover the earth and have forgotten that we existed. It was not Maya. It was not a ladder to perfection. It was this cold sunlight falling on this warm earth. When I turned, you went to hell. When your ship fled the battle, I followed you and lost the world without regret, but with stormy recriminations. Someday, far down that corridor of horror, the future, someone who buys this picture of you for the frame at a stall in a dwindled city will study your face and decide to harbor it for a little while longer from the waters of anonymity, the acids of breath. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to introduce Charles Simic. Charlie has, he's won just about everything there is to win: Pulitzer Prize, the Wallace Stevens Award. He's been poet laureate. His real prize is that he has readers. He has readers who are devoted to his imagination. The most recent book is a book called That Little Something, published by Harcourt Brace. I also strongly recommend a sort of a nifty selected poems called 60 Poems, published by George Braziller. And there's a nifty, Au Sable Press has published just a nifty collection of notebooks. The Monster Loves His Labyrinth. And the entries in the notebooks are like Simic poems. I admired these poems, as so many readers have, for decades, simply for their power of imagination. And something I always mused upon was that Charlie is the great exception to a rule, which is that poetry, and I've already done stupid jokes about fiction. I respect fiction immensely. But unlike fiction, poetry is supposed to be written by people in their mother tongue, your mama lotion. You're supposed to write poetry in the language you heard before you could speak, as an infant. Nabokov, writing in English, which he learned from his governess as a child, is not remarkable. Same with Conrad, Joseph Conrad, who started off in Polish. Simic is kind of unique. And I've mused about this for years, admired the poems for years, and I hope I'm entitled to say friend, having gotten to be Charlie's friend in the recent years as we've done different stuff together, including the jazz stuff. I think I understand it better. The poems he reads about listening to American jazz as a young man, fairly new, relatively new to this country. And excuse me for doing it, but also things he's told me about his own life explain it to me. He inhabits language and the English language with the imagination of somebody who is enjoying a possibly sinister, dire environment. And I felt I was learning about the magic of the imagination when he described to me being a child during a war and an occupation and the exchange from one army to another, and what fun it was for kids. Though grown-ups had to worry about death, about not enough fuel to heat the rooms, for the kid, hey, no school. And you can run around all day and do scandalous things with your friends. You're free. And there's a paradoxical freedom and even innocence, though it's innocence encountering many awful things. The imagination is free to play hooky. And for me, the charm of the poems and the things that make you keep going back to the poems and wanting another and another has to do with that somewhat anarchic, self-contained spirit of freedom. I hope you'll see what I mean. Charles Simic.
Thank you, Robert. I mean, it's always tough when you get a really nice introduction to follow up. You kind of want to bask in the glow of the words and sort of stand there. But I have to read poems inevitably. Being 70 years old, about remembering. A couple of books back, I had a very interesting review. Someplace somebody said, the reviewer said, he says, "What's wrong with the Simic? He used to have funny poems. And now all he writes about is going to funerals." And I thought, like, you little creep, you just wait to get to be my age, how you spend your time, So I think I'm going to read some poems here from a volume called My Noiseless Entourage, which I think was the book in question, the book that he described as being, whatever, unlike my previous books. This is called Self-Portrait in Bed. For imaginary visitors, I had a chair made of cane I found in the trash. There was a hole where its seat was, and its legs were wobbly, but it still gave a dignified appearance. I myself never sat in it, though with the help of a pillow one could do that carefully, with knees drawn together, the way she did once, leaning back to laugh at her discomfort. The lamp on the night table did what it could to bestow the air of mystery to the room. There was a mirror, too, that made everything waver as in a fishbowl, if I happened to look that way. Red-nosed, about to sneeze, with a thick wool cap pulled over my ears, reading some Russian in bed, worrying about my soul, I'm sure. People ask me occasionally, do you dream about your childhood? And I tell them, I disappoint them by saying no. But occasionally it does happen that I dream, not so much about my childhood during the war, but I mean, my youth. And but these are not very long dreams. I mean, they're kind of little short clips, and then the film breaks. And they're all black and white. They're sort of like the films that I saw when I was a kid in 1940s, and they have the same feel and the same quality. So this poem is called To Dreams. To Dreams. I'm still living at all the old addresses, wearing dark glasses even indoors, and the hush-hush sharing my bed with phantoms, visiting the kitchen after midnight to check the faucet. I'm late for school, and when I get there, no one seems to recognize me. I sit disowned, sequestered, and withdrawn. These small shops open only at night, where I make my unobtrusive purchases. These backdoor movie houses in seedy neighborhoods, still showing grainy films of my life. The hero always full of extravagant hope, losing it all in the end, whatever it was, then walking out into the cold, disbelieving light, waiting close-lipped at the exit. A poem called The Clocks of the Dead. A poem that really mystifies me now because it describes that time, I guess 20 years ago, I don't know, 25 years ago. That's why it mystifies me. I don't know when this happened. I don't know exactly when I wrote the first version of this poem. I imagine in the 80s, but it could have been earlier. I don't know. But this is just as we started having batteries for watches and clocks. I mean, you didn't have to wind your watch and your clock. And, so I suddenly realized that if you were someplace in a hotel room or visiting someone and you were sleeping in their bedroom, you didn't hear at night, if you woke up, you didn't hear the ticking of various timepieces. And so this was the moment when I said to myself, aha, something is happening here. But I didn't date the poem, so I don't know when this was. And the poem is called The Clocks of the Dead. One night I went to keep the clock company. It had a loud tick after midnight, as if it were uncommonly afraid. It's like whistling past a graveyard, I explained. In any case, I told him I understood. Once there were clocks like that in every kitchen in America. Now the factory's windows are all broken. The old men on night shift are in Charon's boat. The day you stop, I said to the clock, the little wheels they keep in reserve will have rolled away into many hard-to-find places. Just thinking about it, I forgot to wind the clock. We woke up in the dark. How quiet the city is, I said. Like the clocks of the dead, my wife replied. Grandmother, on the wall, I heard the snows of your childhood begin to fall. a poem called The Lives of the Alchemists. The great labor was always to efface oneself, reappear as something entirely different. The pillow of a young woman in love, a ball of lint pretending to be a spider. Black boredoms of rainy country nights, thumbing the writings of illustrious Arabs, offering advice on how to proceed with the transmutation of a figment of time into eternity. The true master, one of them counseled, needs 100 years to perfect his art. In the meantime, the small arcana of the frying pan, the smell of olive oil and garlic wafting from room to empty room, the black cat rubbing herself against your bare leg while you shuffle toward the distant light and the tinkle of glasses in the kitchen. A poem with the title, My Turn to Confess. Somebody surprised me once in an interview by asking me, are you a confessional poet? And I forgot what I said, but I mean, I wanted to say, no, I'm a liar. I mean, what do you mean confessional? I mean, it's more fun to lie than to, tell about your life. I mean, you know the story of your life. I mean, who cares, It's boring to repeat it. All the best stories you already told millions of times, and, your friends groan when you start another one of those stories once again. And so, to put that in a poem, no. So, but anyway, I wrote a poem called My Turn to Confess. A dog trying to write a poem on why he barks. That's me, dear reader. They were about to kick me out of the library, but I warned them. My master is invisible and all-powerful. Still, they kept dragging me out by the tail. In the park, the birds spoke freely of their own vexations. On a bench, I saw an old woman cutting her white curly hair with imaginary scissors while staring into a small pocket mirror. I didn't say anything then, but that night I lay slumped on the floor, chewing on a pencil, sighing from time to time, growling too at something out there I could not bring myself to name. A little poem called Unmade Beds. They like shady rooms, peeling wallpaper, cracks on the ceiling, flies on the pillow. If you're tempted to lie down, don't be surprised. You won't mind the dirty sheets, the rasp of rusty springs as you make yourself comfy. The room is a darkened movie theater where a grainy black and white film is being shown. A blur of disrobed bodies in the moment of sweet indolence that follows lovemaking, when the meanest of hearts comes to believe happiness can last forever. There's a poem called Ghosts. I'm just going to read it. I don't believe in ghosts. It's not like, but, there's always an exception, ghosts. Is Mr. Brown looking much better than he did in the morgue? He's brought me a huge carp in a blood-stained newspaper. What an odd visit. I haven't thought of him in years. Linda is with him, and so is Sue. Two pale and elegant, fading memories holding each other by the hand. Even their lipstick is fresh, despite all the scientific proofs to the contrary. Is Linda going to cook the fish? She turns and gazes in the direction of the kitchen while Sue continues to watch me mournfully. I don't believe any of it, and still I'm scared stiff. I know of no way to respond, so I do nothing. The windows are open. The air is thick with the scent of magnolias. Drops of evening rain are dripping from the dark and heavy leaves. I take a deep breath. I close my eyes. Dear specters, I don't even believe you are here, so how is it you are making me comprehend things I would rather not know just yet? It's the way you stare past me at what must already be my own ghost before taking your leave as unexpectedly as you came in, without one of us breaking the silence. My throat is itchy. Spring is coming, so that's the first sign of spring. A poem called Via del Tritone, Street of Tritons. Via del Tritone. There's a nice fountain. It's in Rome, with tritons. In Rome, on the street of that name, I was walking alone in the sun in the noonday heat, when I saw a house with shutters closed, the sight of which pained me so much I could have been born there and left inconsolably. The ochre walls, the battered old door, I was tempted to push open and didn't, knowing already the coolness of the entrance, the garden with a palm tree beyond, and the dark stairs on the left. Shutters close to cool, shadowy rooms with impossibly high ceilings, and here and there a watery mirror and my pale and contorted face to greet me and startle me again and again. You found what you were looking for, I expected someone to whisper, but there was no one, neither there nor in the street, which was deserted in that monstrous heat that gives birth to false memories and tritons. This next poem, I really enjoyed reading when I was Poet Laureate in Washington. You'll see them why. But it's a poem about a grandmother of mine who died in 1948 when I was 10 years old. And because she took care of me pretty much during the war. My mother had to work, and my father was in Italy. I kind of remember her well, and with great affection. And she understood or spoke languages, as you know, wasn't very unusual in the Balkans. I mean, people tend to know a few languages, German certainly, and Russian, French, whatever. And she used to listen to the radio, and of course, you can just imagine what the radio was like in occupied Europe the kind of voices you heard coming through. So this is a memory of that. And the poem is called Empires. My grandmother prophesied the end of your empires, all fools. She was ironing. The radio was on. The earth trembled beneath our feet. One of your heroes was giving a speech. Monster, she called him. There were cheers and gun salutes for the monster. I could kill him with my bare hands, she announced to me. There was no need to. They were all going to the devil any day now. Don't go blabbering about this to anyone, she warned me, and pulled my ear to make sure I understood. A poem called Carrying On Like a Crow. Are you authorized to speak for these trees without leaves? Are you able to explain what the wind intends to do with a man's shirt and a woman's nightgown left on the laundry line? What do you know about dark clouds, ponds full of fallen leaves, old model cars rusting in a driveway? Who gave you permission to look at the beer can in a ditch, the white cross by the side of the road, the swing set in the widow's yard? Ask yourself if words are enough, or if you'd be better off flapping your wings from tree to tree and carrying on like a crow. This is a poem. It's an older poem that I sort of changed a number of things in it, called Late Coal. A message for you, piece of shit. You double-crossed us. You were supposed to get yourself crucified for the sake of the truth. Who? Me? The smallest crumb, thankfully overlooked on the dinner table, a born coward, a perfect nobody. What a hell of a mess. In the window pane, my mouth gutted open, aghast, my judges all wearing black hoods. It must be a joke, a misunderstanding, fellows, a wrong number, surely. Someone else's dark night of the soul. This is called Filthy Landscape. The season of lurid wildflowers sprawled over the meadows, drunk with kissing the red-hot summer breezes. A stream opens its legs in the half-undressed orchard, teeming with foul-mouthed birds and smutty fruit flies, with a scandalous view of a hilltop in pink clouds of debauchery, the sun peeking between them now and then like a whoremaster. This is called Sad as a Ship in a Bottle. Sad as a matchbox in a house where they've stopped smoking. sad as a soap of a movie queen after she steps out of the shower, sad as a love pill in a pocket of a dead man, happy as a mouse in a rocking chair, happy as a pair of dentures. No, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Sad as a Maybug in June, sad as a hot dog eating champ having dinner in a fish restaurant. All right, let's see now. This is a book called That Little Something, and a poem called Encyclopedia of Horror. Nobody reads it but the insomniacs. How strange to find a child slapped by his mother only this morning, and a mad homeless woman who squatted to urinate in the street. Perhaps they missed something. That smoke-shrouded city after a bombing raid, the corpses like cigarette butts in a dinner plate overflowing with ashes. But no, everyone is here. Oh, were you to come, invisible tribunal, there'd be too many images to thumb through, too many stories to listen to, like the one about guards playing cards after they were done beating their prisoner. I know, I read someplace, before I just, how this poem came about, this next one. There's somebody working in a bomb factory. And I thought, well, their job is safe. Listen, everything about you, my life, is both make-believe and real. We're a couple working the night shift in a bomb factory. Come quietly, one says to the other, and he takes her by the hand and leads her to a rooftop overlooking the city. At this hour, if one listens long and hard, one can hear a fire engine in the distance, but not the cries for help. Just a silence growing deeper at the sight of a small child leaping out of a window with his night clothes on fire. This next poem was good to read in Washington. It's called Labor and Capital. The softness of this motel bed on which we made love demonstrates to me in an impressive manner the superiority of capitalism. At the mattress factory, I imagine the employees are happy today. It's Sunday, and they're working extra hours like us for no pay. Still, the way you open your legs and reach for me with your hand makes me think of the revolution. Red banners, crowd charging, someone stepping on a soapbox as the flames engulf the palace, and the old prince in full view steps to his death from a balcony. All right. title poem, That Little Something. A poem, talk about memory. It started with something that occurred in late 70s in New York City. And I had almost the first three stanzas, and then the last 5 lines, it took, I don't know, 20 years, not because something extraordinary happens. I realize you just have to live your life, to figure out what comes next. That little something. The likelihood of ever finding it is small. It's like being accosted by a woman and asked to help her look for a pearl she lost right here in the street. She could be making it all up, even her tears, you say to yourself as you search under your feet, thinking, not in a million years. It's one of those summer afternoons when one needs a good excuse to step out of a cool shade. In the meantime, whatever became of her? And why, years later, do you still, off and on, cast your eyes to the ground as you hurry to some appointment where you are now certain to arrive late? About 3 more poems. Every time I say that, something like, I'm going to read 2 or 3 more poems. I remember reading with Denise Levertov. It's the Guggenheim Museum. God, it's late 60s. And so she said, I'm going to read like 2 more poems. And she said, no, you're such a wonderful audience. I'm going to read this poem I just finished recently. It has 15 sections. And it was dark. It was very dark, low lights, She's all illuminated there, kind of blissful. And she reaches for this manuscript, and people started crawling out. I did too. Because it was a long reading, right? And I remember a portly gentleman. It was a kind of place where the people who gave money to the Guggenheim Museum, their wives would drag them, the bankers, Wall Street types, to these things, and the wives would sit there, kind of blissful, listening to poetry, and the old guys, were kind of, fall asleep, and this old gentleman was kind of crawling on all fours with his desperate look, which I love. He had 15 parts, woke him up. So anyway, we're not going to do that. No, I don't think so. Poem called Late September. The mail truck goes down the coast carrying a single letter. At the end of a long pier, the bored seagull lifts a leg now and then and forgets to put it down. There is a menace in the air of tragedies in the making. Last night you thought you heard television in the house next door. You were sure it was some new horror they were reporting. So you went out to find out, barefoot, wearing just shorts. It was only the sea sounding weary after so many lifetimes of pretending to be rushing off somewhere and never getting anywhere. This morning it felt like Sunday. The heavens did their part by casting no shadow along the boardwalk or the row of vacant cottages. Among them a small church with a dozen gray tombstones huddled close, as if they too had the shivers. This is called Gray-Headed Schoolchildren. Old men have bad dreams, so they sleep little. They walk on bare feet without turning on the light, or they stand leaning on gloomy furniture, listening to their hearts beat. The one window across the room is black, like a blackboard. Every old man is alone in this classroom, squinting at that fine chalk line that divides being here from being here no more. No matter. It was a glass of water they were going to get, but not just yet. They listen for mice in the walls. A car passing on the street. Their dead fathers shuffling past them on their way to the kitchen. I was just thinking whether I should introduce this poem. I'm not going to introduce it. It's called In a Planetarium. Never yet equaled widescreen blockbuster that grew more and more muddled after a spectacular opening shot. The pace, even for the most patient, killingly slow, despite the promise of a show-stopping, eye-popping ending, the sudden shriveling of the whole to its teensy starting point, erasing all, including this bag of popcorn we are sharing. Yes, an intriguing but finally irritating puzzle with no answer forthcoming tonight from the large cast of stars and galaxies, in what may be called a prodigious expenditure of time, money, and talent. Let's get the fuck out of here, I said, just as her upraised eyes grew moist, and she confided to me, much too loudly, I have never seen anything so beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you.